The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Liz Burkhart, Director of Marketing for Agile Education Marketing, and we are delighted to have a returning guest, Michael Niehoff, an educator and education expert, and he is going to be talking to us about everything that's gone on since the last time we met. I believe it was July. So let's start off with a couple housekeeping things. I've got a couple more introductions, and we also have a poll for you here in a second. This is being recorded, and so you will receive the link to this recording, and Michael also wants to make sure that you guys have the slides. So in that email, you'll have two links, one to the slides and one to the actual recorded session that we're doing for you today. Your mics will be on mute. So you will see on the right-hand side that there is a question widget. So actually, today is going to be a little bit different. So throughout our presentation, if you can go ahead and just put your questions in as you have them, myself and Kara Murphy, that I will introduce in a second, we will be managing those questions as best we can. And where it makes sense, we'll ask Michael to pause for a second and we'll address those. Because this is, again, interactive, and everything is changing as we speak. So we felt like it might be a little bit more valuable for everyone if we managed questions that way. But ones that we can keep to the end, we'll do that, and we'll save some time there at the end. So Kara is a little bit behind the scenes today for us, and she is also on the marketing team at Agile. And she is going to be helping out with anyone who has technical issues, or if you have questions about the session or about Agile, she's the person who will be getting back to you. She also manages all of our webinars. And so she'll be sending out at the very, very end a survey. And so if you have thoughts, especially as we start working on next year, are there topics or presenters that you'd really like to see, or if you have other questions, you'll see that survey, and so you'll be connecting with Kara to answer your questions or to share thoughts about what we need to cover moving into next year that is shaping up to be another really interesting one. So Michael, thank you so much for putting together today's session for us. And as we've been doing pretty much since March, we kind of have a title and a little bit of an abstract, and then we just sort of hand the time over to our presenter or presenters because things change so quickly. So we asked you to come back to us and meet with everyone and talk to us about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So what's been going on? So before we get started, Kara, would you mind opening up the poll? And we are going to find out what your experiences have been in your business with everything going on. What do you think Michael is going to be sharing with us and what he's found? Do you think it's been mostly good, bad, or ugly?
This is really interesting, and I am so glad that we have a good group of attendees, because I think you all will be very surprised at what Michael is going to share with us today. I'm still going to give it a few more seconds for anyone who needs to get back to their screen.
All right.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to close the responses. Thank you everyone for participating. So Michael, this is interesting. We have about 12% good, 40% bad, and 48% ugly.
Wow.
So, I mean, we got across the board, but I think people are going to be very glad that they're attending this webinar today.
I certainly hope so. Looks like a bad election result. So.
All right, so that's what people think. So Michael, tell us how it is.
Okay. First of all, Kara and Liz and Agile, thank you guys for having me back. It's fantastic to be associated with you guys and to participate in great opportunities just to share with folks, whether they're educators or folks that are supporting educators. So in terms of just real quickly, my background again was a longtime secondary school educator. So high school teacher, high school administrator, a whole bunch of other things in between. And I've worked in a variety of environments, including community college and higher education, and then done a lot of work in project-based learning and technology integration and career development. So if you ever want to connect with me, feel free to do so, since you have a copy of the slides and the webinar. So we did the poll, right? We're good. Hopefully we can kind of address this issue. I too am somebody that I think, especially in 2020, can really come up with a long list of the bad and the ugly. I'm going to start off with the good, and then we will hit a little bad and ugly. But then we're going to dedicate this to good, because the reality is in education, people are counting on us. I think privately and professionally, we can share a lot of really high-level frustrations. But the reality is, I still am a kid person, and I believe the kids are counting on us, and they need people who are going to, when it's all said and done, that are going to lead and end with the good. So I'm going to try to model that. So my first thing to kick us off is this young lady that I discovered a few months ago, who is a social media superstar, and her name is Nandi Bushnell. She's a young gal who lives in Great Britain, the United Kingdom. She's a musician, and she basically is what I think is kind of the future of both young people and sort of the future of the world. She's taken her life in her own hands, and she's taken her passion, and she has the tools and the wherewithal to go global with it. And so if you ever look up Nandi Bushnell, you'll find her on YouTube, you'll find her all over social media. And I think she's around 11, 12 years old at this point. But my concern as an educator, what are we going to do with kids like this? This is what they're coming with. They're coming with interests and passions. They're coming with skills. They're coming with talents. And they're coming with tools. And so we need to be prepared for them. Real quickly, in case you haven't seen Nandi, you just got to watch a few seconds of it, because one, you're going to see her talent, but you're also going to see her confidence and the way she is basically taking charge of her own life. So recently she took on Dave Grohl, who's probably one of the most famous musicians in the world. So if you want to talk about confidence, this is what I think we mean when we want young people to have agency or ownership. So here we go. We'll just play a few seconds of this, and this is basically Nandi talking about the call out she did to Dave Grohl online.
Dave just responded to my let's see what he says.
You gotta love it.
Since the day I recorded it in 1997. Our drummer Taylor Hawkins plays that song for us every night. But Nandi, in the last week, I've gotten at least 100 texts from people all over the world saying, this girl is challenging you to a drum off. What are you going to do? Well, look, I've seen all your videos. I've seen you on TV. You're an incredible drummer. I'm really flattered. You put some of my songs to do for your videos, and you've done them all perfect. So.
Okay, so gonna go ahead and stop there and see if we can. We'll get back to. But basically, I want you guys to be aware of what Nandi is capable of doing. So we can get this back on here. There we go. So, yeah, basically Nandi is, like I said, an internet sensation, and she has posted videos for the last couple of years of her playing, but this recent thing where she challenged Dave Grohl went to the next level and went even more viral. So if you can kind of imagine that. So one of the things I'm wondering, and I don't know if this is good, bad, or ugly, and maybe it's a little bit of all three, is are we seeing the end of school as we know it? And that's going to be kind of one of the themes that comes up today. Is we are, for a variety of reasons, not just the pandemic, but certainly the pandemic, I think, was the tipping point. But because of technology, because of the economy, because of the kind of globalization and all the things that we hear about, school as we know it may be sort of on its last iteration. And that makes a lot of people nervous, and it makes some people excited, or makes most of us probably both, right? So I think Nandi is my poster child for what we need to be thinking about when we're thinking about what school can be or what learning could be like. I think we have thousands and millions of Nandis out there who, unfortunately, are not going Nandi level because they just don't have yet the confidence or the tech skill or savviness, but they have the passion and the skills and talents. And I think it's our job to find Nandi in our schools and make everybody this confident, this passionate, that type of thing. So are we being liberated? One of the things that the pandemic has definitely produced is, kind of a break or a release or a liberation from testing. And by the way, this is happening K-12 and in higher education. So we have universities and colleges that are, the ACT and the SAT have also been something that's gotten a lot of scrutiny the last few years. And now they're looking at maybe it's the last leg of the SAT. And this is important in the sense that what's going to replace it, right? What are universities and colleges, if they're not using standardized tests to assess whether people are quote unquote, eligible to attend their school, what's it going to be like? And but before we get to that, we're going to kind of go into the bad and ugly, okay? When we talk about empathy, we should be talking about good, but the problem is if we are demonstrating lack of empathy. So if I got Nandi Bushnell as a student and I'm not acknowledging what she's already doing outside of school, that's kind of showing a lack of empathy in my opinion. But unfortunately, it can even be worse than that, right? And I think all of us in education have to be looking out for the folks, looking out not just for our students and our families, but also for our educators that may be struggling as well. But the reality is, as an educator, I really feel like we got to start and end with empathy. We don't know all the battles our students and families are facing, but we should be trying to find out and what it's going to take to support them. And I'll give you a couple really. So this is our bad and ugly portion. Okay. So this was a national story that that happened recently in my local community college. Okay. So this hit home because I know this college very well. And basically, if you want to look at this later, you can click on the news story about it. Essentially, what happened is a mother who has an infant was attending her online college course, a 4-hour criminology or criminal justice course, and was told by the professor that she should not be taking a break to go breastfeed her child. Do that and he said, do that after class. Well, what happened, of course, this went all the way to the administrative level. The bottom line is he was wrong, both legally, but I would argue morally. So the university administration had to remind him that, by the way, the law supports what this young mother was doing. If she was attending class in person, she would be excusing herself for a few minutes, taking a break and going to, somewhere to breastfeed her baby. She was doing that at home. She wasn't doing it on camera. She wasn't sharing the breastfeeding. She was taking a 10-minute break during a 4-hour online class. But the bottom line is, this to me shows that we have some folks that are not, in my mind, they are not checking in with their students, and 1, establishing a relationship rapport with them, and 2, trying to understand what they're facing, and 3, when something comes up, our first reaction needs to be much better than that. We shouldn't have the law be the one that tells us what's right and wrong. We should clearly know in education that that was wrong. He apologized, he corrected it. But I'm concerned that he didn't already arrive at that conclusion on his own. So that's pretty ugly. And so this idea again that we lead with empathy. Our learners are craving. I just saw more news articles this morning about this. That students around the world, the number one thing they're craving is connection with each other, with their teachers, with the world, right? And so one of the things one more I'll mention is I have a 17-year-old daughter who's a senior in high school, and it's all online, of course, at this point, all virtual. She's also taking 2 college courses, all online. In one of those college courses, again, this is another local community college, not the one in the first story. She has one class where the instructor has yet to appear and talk to them. All it is the instructor posting assignments online. There's been no dialogue. The instructor doesn't do any instruction. So the instructor hasn't tried to meet the students online. But the students don't know what the instructor looks like. She doesn't know what they look like or anything like that. It's strictly And I think that's a pretty bad example of how to do school, right? And that we're not trying to get to know our students and we're not interacting with them. So that to me is a lack of empathy, right? Not showing interest in having that relationship. By the way, we know that distance learning is more challenging in some ways, so we should be trying extra hard to build those relationships, right? So again, are we being liberated from testing? And does that present us an opportunity? I'm going to suggest that it does. One of the things I think we have to prepare for is the colleges and universities have already moved this way, and they're going to move further. They're moving towards a more portfolio model. Instead of a standardized test, as a student, demonstrate to me through portfolio work, through digital work, through demonstration, what you know and what you've learned and what you can do. And so this is, I think, what the world has been asking for. The economy is asking for this, industry is asking for this, and now education is starting to kind of, and a lot of us have been doing this for a while. Most of us have had classes where they asked us to perform or to demonstrate our learning, but now the world is really demanding this. What can people do? What can you demo? What can you demonstrate? What can you show us, right? Okay, the other one is what can you make, right? Again, these are what can one design? So we're looking for people that are creative and makers and designers and doers and that take action and produce. So you can use lots of different words. I think that's why you're hearing things about competency-based learning. So if the SAT and ACT goes away, are we looking at something that's more based on performance, on competence? Even in K-12, the tests have become more performance-based. It's still standardized tests, but I think we're going to be getting more and more. If you look at schools that are doing innovative work, they are doing things that are more competency-based, right? The portfolio, the defense of learning, and this idea, mastery learning and competency is you learn and you're able to demonstrate, share, produce, create, design. There's even the transcripts are starting to change. So there's a movement out there that our high school transcripts are not going to be based on the, what we all know as the ABCD and GPA, but more of a mastery transcript. Again, that a transcript that shows, but again, it would be much more like a portfolio that would demonstrate certain things to meet certain performance standards or expectations. So these things are happening. They're not the dominant pedagogy yet, or the dominant, but it looks like around the world, this is where things are going. And so obviously, I think as educators, we got to look to how we can embrace and take advantage of this. And hopefully we actually think it's a good idea as well. So these are some things that have happened in the last few months. These are kind of things going on in our country and around the world. This is again, there's a group of people that are educators and leaders who have long been advocating for lots of change, including being more performance-based and competency and mastery-based. And one of the two things that they are advocating for are that the problem are our standards and our tests, that we have to get rid of the standards and test system. And that the other thing is that we can't allow school or learning to be only created by the educators. So they really think that parents and students and people in the community should have a lot more input, which I think in this country that we probably say that sounds like local control. And by the way, that does happen in this country, right? With school boards and, I live in California where we have local control funding and our accountability is all local, we have a plan. But the bottom line is that this is happening, right? Where people are really asking what school should be like, how do we demonstrate learning, and who should be involved in deciding, and there is more interest every day in the voice of the parent and the student about what that learning could look like. So this is an interesting thing. So I'm going to back to Nandi. What will Nandi want to do when she goes to high school or when she wants to go to college or university? What's she going to be looking for? Is it going to be what we know is traditionally school, or because of her experience? So here's people out there doing interesting. This is an authentic learning lab where learners all over the world can sign up to take these courses. Again, all virtual, all online, but they connect to people all over the world and they get to do interesting projects. And again, so I think we're going to see more and more students, whether it's in K-12 or in college, opting for something different. By the way, nationally right now, there are thousands of students that are leaving there because of the pandemic and because of different issues with distance learning, that are leaving their longstanding public school and going to other things, charter schools, online schools, and even private schools. So they're making a statement, they're speaking out. So there's things like this. This is Think Global School. Again, where people can sign up and have university and college experiences, and get prepared for career and life, but in very different ways, right? Versus, again, not just attending one school in one place, but because you can be online and you can interact with people around the world, and these folks can set up challenges for you and arrange even sometimes travel. This looks like what I think Nandi is going to be looking at. So this is called Think Global School. These are just examples. This is a new private school that started this summer. And it's very interesting. It's middle school right now. It's called World Over International. But they're opening elementary and high school as well. And it's private, it's online, but it's nonprofit private. So, and their concept is they will have cohorts of students who are in a cohort based on their interest area. So like at Nandi is gonna probably choose something related to like music and performance and arts or something. And then she's gonna be with a cohort of students, her age group and her interest area all around the world. And they're going to have these kind of global experiences. So this idea, really maximizing what technology can do and really giving students a real different experience, right? A real engaging, unique, customized, very personalized. So those are kind of some of the things you're saying. So again, going to reference this, are we being liberated? Are things changing? And hopefully, I know I have a lot of company out there in my network of people who are excited about this, right? These are long time coming in most of our eyes. And so we're excited about the fact that we might be changing transcripts and getting rid of the standardized test and adding more portfolio assessment and that type of thing. So one of the things I want to introduce to you guys, this is sort of like now I want to get really back to what I see as the future and the good, right? This is our opportunity right now, is what is going to be the new, where are we going to find our standards or our content? What is going to be what we want our learners and students to be engaged in? If we know that they should be doing things, making things, creating things, and we can call that project-based learning, we can call that deeper learning, we can call it lots of things, but we know we want them to have these experiences and be able to demonstrate and the skills and their learning and use technology. But what are these things? What's the content? What's the standards? What are the things we want them to engage in? So think about, would have been, one time, what do we want our textbook to include, right? And we know the world is still divided up in subjects, right? With English, math, science, social science, and then you get into arts and electives and different things. And we know the world has testing and standards, but this might be the thing that's coming to replace that, is this, and I'm excited about this because I think I like things that have power behind them and meaning, but also that have lots of smart people behind them. So this comes from the United Nations, and a few years ago, the United Nations put out this sustainable development goals, and there's 17 of them, and we're going to kind of learn a little about this. And could this be what students and schools and educators are going to be looking at to connect to? So. There's a little short video. We might not watch the whole thing, but this is what the United Nations did to just try to launch this. Again, they're called SDGs. So you're going to hear this term SDG a lot, Sustainable Development Goal. And this is what they see as the problems and challenges that our world faces. And they kind of want everybody, including students and schools and education, to embrace that, hey, these are the things that we could work on. These are the things that everybody could help us not necessarily solve, but improve and give people richer lives in their local communities and in the world as a whole. So.
We can be. We must be the first generation to end extreme poverty.
The generation
Most determined
to fight injustice and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done. The global goals.
A 15-year plan
For everyone, everywhere.
with no one left behind. We will live in a world
Where nobody
anywhere lives in extreme poverty. Where no one wakes in the morning asking if there will be food today. We will live in a world where no child has to die of
diseases we know how to cure. And where proper health care
is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world and education gives us the knowledge
And skills
for a fulfilling life. We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities to thrive and be powerful and safe.
We cannot succeed if all else can happen. We will live in a world where all people can get clean water and proper toilets at home, school, and work.
We will live in a world where there is sustainable energy for everyone.
Heat, light, and power for the whole planet.
Without destroying the planet.
We will live in a world where economies prosper and new wealth
Lead to different jobs.
for everyone.
And we will live in a world where our industry,
Our infrastructure and our
Best innovations
are not just used to make money, but to make our life better.
we will live in a world where prejudices and extremes of equality are defeated.
Inside our countries,
where people live in cities and communities
That are safe, progressive,
support everyone who lives there.
where we replace
what we consume, climate where we put back what we take out of the earth.
we live in a world that is decisively rolling back.
change.
where we restore and protect the life in our
Oceans and seas.
restore and protect
Life on land, forests,
animals, the earth itself.
with peace between and inside.
where all governments are open.
And answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
And the justice rules.
With everyone equal before the law.
Where all countries we their people,
Work together
partnerships of all kinds
to make these goals a reality. These are the United Nations global goals
for sustainable development.
Let us get to work.
So hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. And if you haven't heard that, this is actually fairly new to me, even though the United Nations technically launched this in 2015. So they say they have a 15-year mission. So the year is 2030. Well, we're already 5 years into that mission, right? But I think you could actually argue that in the last 5 years, we've probably seen a lot of attention paid to these. So did we go all the way back to the beginning here? Shoot, okay. I don't know why it's doing
that out. Thanks, Mike.
But I'm so proud of my slides. I just want to share them with you one more time. So this is just a PowerPoint thing for me. So that will be the last video we play, I think. So okay, so real quickly, I have teachers and educators and leaders asking me almost every day, because I do a lot of work with project-based learning, and even schools and educators that aren't using the term project-based learning, they have interest in doing projects and they have interest in doing research. So they're constantly trying to come up with, well, what should the topics be? What should the questions be? What should be the things we, and they're not going to necessarily find those built in all the time, and certainly into their textbooks or even into their standards. So I'm going to suggest these are them, right? This sustainable development goals, these are the things that if we want our students to research something, or even hopefully better yet, do something with that research, right? Present, produce something, video, public service announcement, podcasts, documents, presentations, brochures, graphics, social media. I mean, we can go on and on about what they could do with this, but these, I think, are the issues, and the United Nations has done this for us, and I think that's really powerful, because if we thought about international influence and international opinion, I'm not sure you could find something with more authenticity and integrity than the United Nations, right? This is not this is not a group of 12 educators in my basement, right? These are leaders from all of the countries around the world who have decided to launch this. So, okay, so I'm going to quickly go through these just so we see them again, and we won't dive into these individually. We got any questions or comments?
Yeah, there is a question that I think as you're going through these, you can probably pepper in some thoughts about it. So Sarah is saying that she's heard about these SDGs for about a year, and she is asking, how do we help to spread the word and help administrators see how important these are and how to integrate them? So I think that your first kickoff comment was great. Like, if we're going to do PBL, you can have math, you can have writing, you can have everything tied to any one of these 17. So that seems great. But maybe as you go through these, kind of giving other thoughts on how you know, we as business leaders, we as parents, we as community members can be more influential and persuasive about using these in the classroom.
Okay, well, one of the, and we'll get to it again, and hopefully you'll see some things, but I'll mention it right now. The goal 17, it's funny, goal 1 through 16 are these different issues that we saw that we're going to see again. Goal 17 is really kind of what I think is the call to action for us. Goal 17 is like the doing these things, like the partnerships and promoting them and connecting. So goal 17 is sort of giving us like the mission, right? And the how could be lots of things, and hopefully we'll talk about that. I have a few thoughts after we go through these, but real quickly, like when I see the goal number 1, no poverty, and we know that's it, all of these are ambitious, right? That we would, but the reality is, I think immediately what I think of is what's going on in our local communities, right? So this is a global problem, but we know that there's powerful things if we start locally. And I'll give you a couple examples. Is that probably in every community of any size in our country, there's somebody working on this, right? There's probably some government agencies that are working on this, but there are also nonprofit organizations and probably some businesses too that have decided that this is something, and it might take on number 1 and number 2, you know, really cross over, right? So when we talk about food insecurity and hunger and poverty, these go hand in hand, and they go into topics like homelessness. But when we get into the food issues, boy, we really start talking about the children, you know, like 1 in 4, supposedly 1 in 5, 1 in 4 kids in America is considered food insecure. So again, with all of these, I think the starting points for us, and we'll hopefully give some examples here, would be 1, do our students have some natural interests in these? And I think they do. They may not have interest in all 16, but I have a feeling that most of our students would have interest in at least 1, if not more. So that's one entry point. But the other entry point, I think, is we have people in our community that are working on things. Can we partner with them? Can we contribute to their work? That gives it a lot of credibility to kids, to students. The more people that are involved, the more this seems like something that professional people or experts are working on. I think that gives that subtle message to the students, hey, this is real, this is a big deal, this is, and the more they engage in that, that leads to lots of things, and we'll talk about those, like the skills they get, the partnerships, the mentoring they get. This leads to careers, this leads to them choosing career paths, and it also just makes their life richer, you know. So if we want kids to have empathy, we have to give them opportunity, you know, and we'll talk about that. So and I'm going to show you a project in a few minutes here that I think addresses this one really well. But we're hearing a lot about mental health, and rightly so, and wellness. So think about all of the things that embraces, right? All the things we're doing in schools and in our communities about not just good physical health with nutrition and diet and quality food, and water gets into that, but also I think the one that's getting more attention, and maybe rightly so, is mental health, right? And wellness. And you know, my gosh, the topics are endless: stress, anxiety, and we know that young people have huge challenges in these areas, right? And statistics aren't good. But one of the things I think that I would advocate for is not just, this is what I see schools doing a lot. They realize this is a problem, so that they have a portion of a class, or they have a class, or they have an advisory where we're going to address well-being. So we're going to read some things, we're going to watch some videos, we're going to talk about it, and all of that is fine. But I would actually say, let's go one step further. Can our students be doing work in this area? So instead of just learning about well-being and mental health, could they be actually engaged in producing things or helping other people with their mental health? So when we help others, not only do we increase a lot of things in our own mental health, but we're engaged in real work too, right? We're doing so that it really takes on a whole thing. So I guess that's kind of the flip I'm hoping for, is not just studying these, but let's engage in these at a high level and get students to produce things that help other people. So like when I think about mental health, can older students be producing things for younger students to help them? Can students be producing things that might help people in the community or help their parents? Let's make them the expert, and let's give them the autonomy and the authority to go out and do things with it, right? And they can join causes, they can partner with organizations. So all of these topics are very rich, right? These are not one question type topics. So we think about quality education. My gosh, we can get into access and technology. what kind of, facilities. We can get into, all kinds of equity issues. And again, it's not just learn about it, but can we be going deep and having students push the envelope, do something with this, right? Maybe they can make suggestions even to their own school about how to, improve or to make things more accessible or interesting. Getting kids involved in education, right? Not just as recipients, but as active, participants. And what do they want from school? What should school be? What can, and so there's lots of, and we could get really specific here, but I think you guys kind of get the idea. This is a great one, right? A lot of things happening in the world with gender. And I think what's really powerful is I'm seeing so many great things happening in our country and around the world in terms of women being and getting more involved in politics, which I think is a good thing, getting more involved in leadership and business, and the mentors are really starting to grow. And I think some people might think, well, that's only going to be of interest to to female students, right? And I'm going to argue that no, we need to find ways for that to be interesting to all students because they're all working in this world. The males need to be part of the solution as well, right? Not just the females. And of course, when you get into gender issues, you see things like there's, this intimate partner violence. There's lots of issues that have to do with gender. And that's not even getting into things like transgender and just the reality of what happens in the world. Just like race, what happens based on gender, right? And getting people to examine how those things are. And again, having kids examine this about themselves and about their world, not just learn about it, but engage and do something about it, right? If we had time, we could dive really deep into all these, but I think, and I'll give you a couple of recommendations here. This is a fantastic one, I think, because there are so many issues related to water. I saw some great projects happen around the country about like when Flint, Michigan had their big water problem. The reality is this is happening a lot. This is not just a third world problem. This is happening a lot in our country too. My own community where I live has some water contamination issues. And so these are things that really get into not just our health, but also gets into sort of equity and access and if we don't have clean water, how does that affect everything? It affects kids and school. It affects, food. I mean, so this is water alone is going to be like the most contested natural resource. And so we already have water wars and water fights and water rights. And so it's going to be a problem we have to solve and address. This obviously, I think, is obvious, right? Lots happening with affordable and clean energy. And, it's an exciting world with lots of opportunity. I think, getting kids again to look at their local community, depending on where you live, you might have, communities that are really taking advantage of wind. Some are taking really advantage of solar. There's companies that are developing new battery technology all the time. Again, it's just, this gets into science a lot, and this gets into economics a lot. But again, there's so many people working on this that our kids have opportunities to partner with lots of great businesses and leaders and so on. So decent work and economic growth, some of these cross over a lot. This kind of gets back to giving people opportunities and careers and looking at where jobs are and what skills you need. And this is so relevant to kids. Again, not just learning about this, but what could they be doing to kind of improve their own opportunities, but also helping teach other people, younger kids, engaging with, so they're, they could become sort of the active participants in addressing this problem. Could even help their parents, right? We have a lot of kids that try to help their parents, with employment and so on, with literacy issues and different things. It'd be nice if our students became the experts that can go out and share, hey, what do you need to be economically successful in our global economy? What skills do you need and how do you advance yourself? And that's changing a lot, right? Because we used to say, well, just go to college. And that hasn't worked completely, right? We have people that graduate from college that are either unemployed or underemployed. So there's more going on about skills and about how you become employable and what industries are growing and where the opportunities are, that kind of thing. So that kind of crosses over into this one, innovation and infrastructure. Again, these are things that are in the news all the time. So if you were looking for a starting point, I think you could have students research things that are in the news, Newsella or anywhere, and align to these, right? All of our issues in the news are going to fall in these one or more of these categories. So I think there's a time I'm going to kind of make sure we get through. and reduced inequality. Some cases I pulled out a statistic, and that's the kind of stuff you can find that would be like a starting point. That would be, some of these statistics are going to get kids' attention, and those are great entry points, right? Sustainable cities and communities. So think about things that are going on with tiny houses. A lot of great projects out there about designing tiny homes and tiny houses, but also just how new kinds of communities, combining, retail and neighborhoods and different kind of things that that different cities are doing and different countries are doing. And this gets into the whole sustainable issue, which is, are we building and designing things that are sustainable, and what does that mean? And are this products sustainable? And a lot of interest from kids in this area, right? Things that our young people really have interest in, making things more sustainable. And this leads to the next one, responsible consumption and production. So you get into products. This is like the plastics. This is like, how we grow our food. This is, and there's a lot happening here in this issue. Great stuff happening in documentaries. There's lots of news out there, lots of data, and lots of people working on this, right? So again, I'd love to be able to dive into all of these really deep. The climate's a continuation of this, right? And this is huge. And our young people care about this, and it's science, but it's a lot more than science too. It's advocacy, it's data, right? This is where data becomes really, really important. And what's happening in our country and our local communities. Almost every local community has some climate impact. So I'm in California, and my God, the fires it's out of control. And we have people in other states, the same thing, right? And there's lots of issues here. But the reality is the world is taking action, and there's lots of entry points for kids, right? And they do care about these things. This is about our oceans, so we're continuing about what's happening with our oceans, rising sea levels, rising temperatures, ocean life, what's happening with species, and of course the connection between the ocean and kind of all of us, and sort of what's happening with coral reefs, what's happening with, so there's great stuff in here. Life on land, again, this gets back to sort of our, everything from our deforestation, what are we doing with land, agriculture, how are we, what's happening with species, what impact are we having on different things, social justice, peace, this is something that's coming up every day, activism, and the global cry for equality and equity, and this gets into all kinds of things again, but our kids are really interested in this for lots of different reasons. So, and then that last one, I just want to mention, this is kind of the call out, the shout out to educators to, and all of us to get involved, right? And to start partnerships. And so 17, I think, is the kind of the design for educators, among others. So there are 17 of the goals. They have targets, and these are some examples of the targets. So this is why I think these could be like standards, right? And this gives you some details now. Can I, 17, enhance global partnerships, and then utilizing technology and expertise and financial resources, right? It kind of gives you that 2030 goal. So those are some examples. So if you go dive into these, you'll find out in each goal, there are targets. And again, is this our opportunity? Do we have a window right now to do something big and bold and get our kids really engaged in meaningful stuff? So I'm going to argue yes. Without the test, and maybe without maybe with this examination of our standards and so on, there's an opportunity here. So we're going to skip this video, but there are 17 goals, 169 targets. There is a website about teaching the Sustainable Development Goals. So you'll see this thing, maybe teach SDGs. They get called the SDGs and the hashtag. And so that's a great place to start if you are an educator, or if you are working with educators and you think this has potential. There are people already, it's not like we have to start from scratch. There are people doing this. And I'm going to make sure that we get to the why I think this is so powerful. Okay, so I think the Sustainable Development Goals address our pedagogy really well. It's project-based, it's inquiry-based, it's performance-based, it's mastery-based, it's global. There's choice, there's opportunities, it's real world, it's relevant, it's problem solving. I can go on and on and on why I think this fits in with all the things that we're attempting to do in education. So I saw this and I love this global problem solvers. I think this is a way to get our kids excited about, kids want to do big, meaningful things. They may not always articulate that, but they really do. So this is a path to do that. We talk about students taking ownership. We want them to be more involved, more engaged. Well, I don't know if there's anything that potentially is more engaging than these, or at least more important than these topics. We might have to still help them with, engaging or their entry point. But when we want kids to take over their learning, we have to challenge them appropriately, right? And we have to also give them the opportunity to take ownership. But I think if they invest in these kind of things and do this kind of work, they become our Nandi, right? So this is a pathway to all kids having that confidence and that agency and that interest and that passion. The skills, I mean, this is what the world's asking our students to be able to do and have, and I think this gives us the vehicle. Doing projects and work in these topics provides us the people we're going to be working with, the research we're going to do, the data we're going to look at, the products we're going to produce, the experiences we're going to have, gives us opportunity to grow these skills and practice these skills. And then I think the partners, this is huge, I think. In every community, we have local partners, and of course we have national, international organizations. The nonprofit partners that work on these goals are endless. And I think for students and teachers and schools to partner with these organizations is money, it's gold. Any of us who've ever done service learning have experienced that, right? If you have ever think about schools doing things with their local blood bank, right? With local food or homeless issues. We've already done this. Kids get really into it and get really excited when they see that what the work they do has impact on others. Well, we can do this now at even a larger level because there's so many great organizations working on it, and we have the technology and the tools to connect kids to so many different things, right? So if you took every one of those development goals, you'd be hard pressed not to find hundreds of partners that are working on each of those, and many of them working on multiple ones, right? And that is where our kids get mentors. That's where they get relevance and authenticity. This is where careers come from. So when we talk about, we want our kids, if you ask most educators, a lot of school districts now have a thing called a graduate profile, is what do we want our kids to look like when they leave school? What can they do? What kind of people do we want them to be? You'll hear these kind of things. I want them to be able to show empathy. I want them to be able to be creative and collaborate and communicate. I want them to engage with the world, be a self-starter, be a lifelong learner, be community and civic oriented. Well, this is a way to create that kind of person, right? So how are we doing on time, ladies? Doing good?
We are.
Okay.
I think there's a couple questions, but I think keep going.
Okay. The last one, so in the idea of the career or grad profile and career preparation, I think that for me, I've always been concerned about when it's all said and done, what do our kids do, for careers, right? Well, I think these problems that are presented in these sustainable development goals are where the jobs are going to be. Can you imagine how many jobs are in the energy sector alone, or in addressing food? Just go through each of those. Water, I mean, water is an exploding industry, right? And it's a problem, it's an issue, but the reality is the people who work on those things have careers, and they have really important and successful careers. So I think engaging in these kind of things shows our kids, first of all, what careers are out there, because we always ask kids, what do you want to do? And they really don't know. And how could they know, right? Or they're going to pick something that the limited view they've had of things. Right? This exposes them to they're going to be partnering with experts that I didn't know that was a job. I didn't know people did that, right? I didn't know people work for nonprofits and get paid. I didn't know you get paid to advocate and for things. I didn't know people get paid to work on these problems in science, in math, in social science, right? So we always hear this term about global and local, like, there's always the old expression about think global, act local, which I still think is really relevant here. These are global issues, but we can, what's attractive, I think, is that the entry point is to start locally and change our local community, or empower or impact our local community. And then we see ourselves as being part of a larger global community. So this term Glocal has come up a lot. So it's kind of combining globalization or global and local together. So it's kind of this idea, we can be doing this simultaneously. We should be engaging in our local community, but we also need to be engaging in the global community, right? And our kids need to kind of see that, right? Sometimes it's easier to have impact locally, or sooner, or it's more attainable or accessible. But we also need to feel like, hey, we're part of the global citizens, and we're trying to make the whole world better as well. So again, I just think it's for all the pedagogy that we try to do and all the outcomes we want, I think this has a lot of potential. So My challenges are these, is could you pick as an educator, if we're talking to teachers or educators, or I would say even administrators, school site people or district office people, could we be challenging our schools and our teachers and our students to pick one of these development goals? Maybe the 16 goals or that 17, maybe those seem really overwhelming, and they are. Let's say those are the biggest things that the world has decided that we have to improve. So maybe just pick one to focus on. Or maybe it's one at a time, right? Maybe it's one grade level focuses on, maybe one class, one teacher. So one of the things I like to do, though, as a project-based learning advocate, is also what would be wrong with maybe students have a choice of which one they want to pursue. And that might determine which one they investigate, and they pick something that they want to do in that area. So they learn a little bit about all of these. And then I think, again, it'd be hard pressed to find a student that at some point wouldn't find some interest in one of these, right? Even the most reticent student, I think I could get to pay attention to one of these. But and so choosing, and that might also help dictate whom they work with, like who their peer collaborators are and who their mentors are in the organization. So again, lots of ways to divide that up, but that could be another way that we would do it. As a teacher, I would consider doing that. Present these to my students, and then they have to choose one of these goals, and they have to do a large investigation and project. Could become a year-long thing. That's kind of a theme. We could rotate. Maybe over the year, each quarter, you have to pick one. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do this, right? The important thing is that as a teacher and as an educator, you have a lot of freedom to some degree to make that happen, especially in our current environment. I want to mention this project. I kind of align it to goal 3 about healthy lives and promoting well-being for all, but we don't have time to look at this project, but this is a school that I did some work with recently, and they're a 250 student TK-8 elementary school, but their kindergartners through 6th graders, I believe, did a school-wide project. So what they did is they picked this idea of toys, and then they did different things related to it. So they're like designing toys for other kids who don't have toys, and they're coming up with what kind of toys have different impacts on kids, and then they're learning how to market the toy, they're learning how to design toys, but what they're doing is they decided that toys are kind of a universal thing that kids all have experience with, and yet they have different experiences. Some kids don't have access to the same toys, right? Some kids, so they're kind of doing this investigation on what basically why do toys bring joy to kids, and then what can we contribute to that. So definitely a cool thing worth looking at.
Hey, Michael. So we've got about 7 minutes. So I think there are a couple questions, and I'm not remembering how much more you had to share with us today. So I know that you've got websites on each of the slides and a lot of content. So we can certainly connect people with you, and they're going to get the deck, but maybe we take some questions. And if there's time for you to pick like 1 or 2 of your favorite things. But I really appreciate you putting this together. And I think, for our audience, this is like point in time. So it's, that our presenters the last few months have had this really big task of bringing together like what is it that's super relevant right now, and everything changes every 5 seconds. Right. So so thank you again. So let's take a couple questions, and I'll let you pick 1 or 2 things that you really want to make sure the audience walks away with, and then we'll close for our time today. But I think we probably should invite you back in January. I think that would make a lot of sense.
Fantastic.
All right, Kara, do we have some questions?
Yes. So being that at the beginning of the poll, we had 48% say that it was ugly. So given as marketers and people that are selling into education and they're seeing the ugly, is that ugly from they're doing the same thing, but the teachers and students need something different and they need to try pulling in something like this? And if you answered ugly, feel free to write it in the chat of what you've seen as the ugly. Because I know lots of educators, there's been free trials. I mean, there's new products going into schools every single day. And moving into 2021, I'm sure we're going to have more back to school dates because sometimes kids go back and they don't go back. So if they're seeing the ugly, what is something to try or change that they can see the good in what's happening?
Is that a question for me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I if I'm understanding correctly, I think this is an opportunity, and yes, if I suppose a couple things, if people are having bad experiences or negative experiences in this current environment, whether as a student or as a parent or as an educator, and I know there are people having those for sure, and we can read about them every day. Is this an opportunity maybe to change that, right? Is it going to be something that's going to get this either? What's the problem? Is it student engagement and student motivation? Is it like relevancy? Is it we're trying to do the same thing we've always done and we're doing it virtually and it doesn't work? So yeah, I think all of the above. I mean, in terms of somebody who, I don't know, in terms of like, if I was marketing things, maybe there's tools that could accompany these, whether that's like, helping people with video, helping people with podcasts, so maybe it's some technology type of thing. Maybe it's the partnership aspect. Maybe it's looking for some existing projects that embody these because they're out there already, that we can join up. We don't have to create it from the ground up. We can kind of join existing work. So yeah, and I try to even argue that I know a lot of us are still really attached to, and for a lot of good reasons, our standards and our subjects. I think you can connect our subjects to the SDGs. You can connect standards. So I look at English as an example. This connects to all of those very easily. Science would connect to almost all of those very easily. Math and social science, a little more work, but I think math, as you get into data collection and data analysis, I mean, it's there. We just have to make that bridge. So I don't know if that answers that question. I do want to make sure people know the resources that are there. These are people that are doing the SDGs, either in education or they're doing them in the outside world, but they're advocating for this. So these are some great resources out there, especially the Teach SDGs and the SDG Academy. And so yeah, what else do we have? I hope I answered that question, but
You did, and I think too, because that's, you're on the education side, and so our on the Agile side, we work to connect the people who serve educators. So understanding, what's going on in the classroom and what they're grappling with is critical to talking about what you have to offer in a relevant way. And I think that you mentioning the project-based learning, the connections to reality, is really that I think is where that sweet spot is going to be, like especially moving into next year for businesses and how they are really. I think that for our clients and for the people that have joined us today, I think really thinking differently about how you talk about your product. I think so many things can just be used in a different way. And I think when we were prepping for today, it was like duct tape. Like, who knew 100 years ago that you could make purses out of duct tape? And so just internally in your own, discussions and planning meetings, thinking about, these 17 SDGs and what it is that students are trying to do. But the fact, and I'm happy that you continue to bring it through, our teachers are liberated from so many things that have really fenced in their ability to think creatively, and they haven't had the opportunity in so long. So I think that is something that can happen. And so I don't know, I mean, maybe Michael, have you heard from a vendor or supplier or had a connection that went really well, and maybe just talk to us a little bit about how that went and why you really paid attention to what they were bringing to you?
Well, this is tough. I have, when I think of vendors, suppliers, I think I'm most familiar with people that are providing professional development. So a lot of those folks are trying to offer things like project-based learning or technology integration, doing something deeper, more critical thinking, more collaboration. And I think this could be what I think is whatever platform or tool or resource, or even I think what I like about the SDGs, that might, if we could show how you could connect them, that's the SDGs is like the interest, right? That's like the what. And then hopefully our vendors are going to show us the how, right? Is it, are there, I think a lot of technology tools could play into this really, really well. Anyone that's trying to either, things like, I think like Newsella that does, news and research, but, a lot of our technology formats and products, they want us to produce something at the end. So if we're learning how to produce videos or, different kinds of other tech products, what could those be about, right? So, yeah, I just think that could be an interesting thing if someone could use this as an entry point to get kids or teachers and educators interested in something, and then what the tool or resource or application that they have fits in well with this, right? So if anybody's doing things with technology or producing products, I'm thinking, boy, if I was doing something with people that are doing like portfolios, there's a lot of products out there about student portfolios and websites and those kind of things, or anything where kids are writing and publishing. It seems like this could be a great entry point about how do you use these tools. This would be great if you're looking for. I just think I could. We could probably work on that more, but.
No, thank you. I think that you got some people's wheels turning. Kara, do we have any more?
Yes, there's one last one that kind of goes off of what you just talked about. And I think it's really important to understand as marketers. We talked about the what and we talked about the how, but the who. And a lot of the who, for the most part, that is at the forefront of the minds is educators, teachers. But throughout the presentation, you need to go deeper. What are the students? Like, you're reaching multiple people with your one product. And how can you change your messaging for, yes, the educator to use that, but they have to be able to use that communication with students. And are the students maintaining that relationship and the knowledge with what you're putting out as well? So I think opening up your persona to the educator and the student goes exactly in line to the who, what, and how of what can work really well for educators, vendors, students moving into the new world of education. And I think that's something that a lot of the people from today can take away with this is it's all encompassing, it's changing, it's going to change. It may not be the SDGs right away, but the communication, the learning, the teaching, there's opportunity for everyone on this call to be able to make that change and connections.
And I'm hoping it's obvious. There's a lot of people already doing this, and they're just not calling it the SDGs, but they're doing work and things that fit into those. The SDGs is just a way to sort of categorize, and it happens to be done by the United Nations and have a lot of backing. But all across the world, there are educators and students that are doing research and projects and work in these topics already. They just might not be using, so some of this is not new to everybody, right? The SDGs might be new, but these topics are not brand new to everybody. But I just think it's a way to house it. So.
Well, and I think it's a way to get people to pay attention. One of our first questions was along those lines. How do we get people to pay attention? Well, when it's the United Nations and it's global, that's really interesting. And you can break down a lot of barriers that way. Something else that you mentioned, and from being on the business side of education, it strikes me, you were mentioning that parents are making really different decisions about where their kids are going, and it's increasing. So I think that, in terms of like why administrators should care, it's, to keep your students coming to your school. I was going to say protect your enrollment, and that's not I don't like how that sounds, but I think that you have to provide an education that parents and students feel are going to help them with the new entries into vocational or colleges and universities and community colleges, whatever that next step is for them. And I think that this is a way for schools to do that. And it's, yeah.
I've said that for a long time. I've worked in a school that, that had to attract enrollment. Was a new school that didn't have built-in enrollment. We had to go out and kind of sell our school to the community. But more importantly, I think right now we have to realize this has been going on, but now it's just reached a crescendo. Every student in America has multiple choices. They could all go to all online. Forget pandemic. They could go all online for free, public school tomorrow for the rest of their career and never go to the neighborhood school. They all probably have a charter school or more that they all could go to tomorrow. So I think personally, all people who work in schools, if you think that you you think you have a good school or a good district, you should care about people wanting to see it as a choice, see it as not I'm forced to go to your school. I continue to choose your school or district, because they do all have choices.
Yeah, so thank you for that. So we've gone a little bit over. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us, but thank you for putting this together. I really appreciate it. I appreciate it's a little gutsy to sort of take a title and wait until the last minute and go, okay, what's changed? What's actually happening? So I appreciate you tackling this for us and giving us a lot of things to think about and to act on. So that's great. Thank you, Kara, very much. Everyone, please take a couple seconds to answer the post webinar survey. That really helps us out, and we will see everyone back. I think we're going to start next year in January, and we'll put something really great together for everyone. So thank you. Happy Halloween, however you are going to be enjoying that day. And thanks everyone for your time. And thank you very much again, Mike.
Karen, Liz, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
My pleasure.